On your last slide, in the bottom right corner, you said proof, compliance to explicit rules. By the way, very nice talk, very interesting, clear. Compliance to explicit rules. I want to, but when you just explained that, you didn't quite say it the same way, because I don't think it is compliance to explicit rules, but it is responding to explicit behaviours, even though the rules aren't explicit. You know what I mean? You submit a paper.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yes.
You submit a paper and you get criticism, but they don't say, oh, in line 27 you didn't follow the rule.
Yeah, that's true. It should be, well, this is just
rules.
that they know what to do here. They're not in doubt. They don't have to kind of go out and see how others are doing, what others are thinking. They do that here, so it's two different situations.
They have a tendency to be objectified as norms or whatever you want to call it. They can point to them and talk about them, give them names. These things over here. You cannot use so many diagrams. We all know that. I mean, whereas this is much more. I have a feeling that this mathematician will find this interesting.
But you said they can point to them and give them names. What rules of acceptance? Rules of deduction?
It could just be don't include figures.
Okay.
Don't deduce things for figure.
Rhetorical
things.
rules.
Yeah. Or rules of what is considered rigorous arguments. Whereas, so that
maybe conventions is a better word.
Conventions are the yes. That's better.
Would it make sense and/or would it be possible to compare what you get from these interviews with looking at refereeing mathematical papers and what editors do? I have recent experience with two different editors who clearly had very strong pictures of what was what detail they wanted and what detail they didn't want. And it wasn't necessarily what I thought was the difficult bits. The editors seem to have a very strong view of the bottom right-hand corner. It might be interesting, or I'm asking, would it be helpful or interesting to ask them to articulate that?
Well, there's different level editors. I mean, there's editors as in the academic referee, but then there's also editors in the sense of copy editors who don't like the way you do your commas, or they can have quite a striking effect.
Yeah, I think that would be very interesting because, well, the referees and the editors, they hold a lot of power, but what they're doing is actually unclear and especially the referees, what is a good referee and how do people go about that? There's a little empirical work on it, but I guess it would be nice, it would be interesting. I would like to see that.
Yes, I'm interested in the left-hand side.
Yeah.
I think that is, for me, a more revealing side to be working on. I'm thinking about the fact that you are going on, I'm taking the headline there, how to investigate. You're going by what they tell you, is that right?
Yeah.
Did you feel you actually wanted to get a bit closer to actually what they were choosing to do as opposed to what they were telling you about? Do you understand my question?
So
it's quite difficult in doing this kind of research to actually get at the actual values that they're pursuing. Because we may use questionnaire or something, or even your questions. They'll tell you what they think they have been doing in general, normally, whatever.
You're right. That this is a danger. This is always a danger with interview research, right? Do we get pictures of people's life world or their self-image, right? We've heard that from the corner several times. But what our strategy towards that has been to talk for a relatively long time with people and be very, very concrete in the examples that they describe. So, show me about this piece of research that we've done. Show me this picture. One interesting thing was, I Mikkel, for instance, asked, show me a paper where you actually have a diagram. And well, you can tell yourself, well, I can just also, the guy goes and fetches the paper where he thinks there's a diagram, and there's not, because in the final what we try to do in order to meet your needs is to be as concrete and close to their work as possible. But this is always a problem with understanding people's work.
There's another point where in a sense, what you're trying to do is to sort of interrupt the flow and say, what are you thinking? You know, there's a model of people continuing to work, and then you sort of want to interrupt it in a way. I think well, you might get more interesting information for when they start going up a wrong path, a loose end. They realise at a certain point that this is not going to, this approach or this problem isn't going to work in the way that we thought. They have to change some idea. I think for a lot of this, you have to kind of interrupt the flow, be there when the flow is interrupted, if you like, because then they have to make choices, and that's when the values get revealed.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but this is very difficult, right? Because
All that
you cannot. I mean, you cannot sit next to a mathematician for half a year. You can still not learn that because things.
But also one of the things that we kind of believe we established here is that some of the governing values, they are not personal, but they belong to the society. So what would be interesting would also see how are these values negotiated. How does the mathematical society find out that this kind of research is now fashionable, whereas that kind of thing was so last year. So how are these decisions made? Because the individual mathematician, he just has to comply with that. You cannot just force through what I believe is interesting. He has to comply with this social decision. So that's why we would like some of these to find not a list of values here, but instead to find out the process. What is the process by which the mathematical society decides these values? That might be extremely interesting too, regarding grants, etc., etc.
Would be very interesting.
Yeah. Okay, there is a queue, so we have Jeremy and Norma, and then Emily.
Have you asked them whether, in some sense or other, they either changed their field of mathematics or had to change it because somebody had a big idea and you just had to adjust?
We have some. I have at least one I can remember. We asked them here how they choose the problems, and then they all gave us these three. And then we also asked them, what about what the university management says? What about? And they all said no, more or less. And there was one here, he also gave us the explanation. He said, well, it's fashionable here for university leaders, and then 5 years we do this, and then there's this pattern, then we do that. But he didn't think it was productive. So the best thing, so he just ignored them, because the best thing you can do, it takes too long to get to the kind of the front. So the best thing is always to work from where you are, and then and then to listen to the mathematical community, what they think is valuable, and then kind of, you shouldn't just jump field to entirely, that would be too expensive career-wise. So he said he would not do that, even if, regardless of what the management told him to.
I think the underlying principle, so to speak, is that you're very aware of where you are yourself as a mathematician and where you can benefit. You might be able to benefit with your method in some other field. That's super, right? Yeah. But you cannot just pick up your bag and move to a different area of research.
Yeah, we had this one guy also. He had some method that then he could use the methods he knew from one field in another field, and then he had a head start there. Anyway,
so the reason I'm asking is that it's quite clear that not everybody starts research at the age of 25 and continues until 75. Some people's ponds just dry up.
Yeah.
So and if that starts happening, you have to start thinking whether you can migrate to another pond.
Yeah. The guys we had, they were drying it, apparently.
Big wet ponds.
Yeah.
Norma, is it fairly quick?
It's more or less clarified. To what extent this distinction between fashion and stable is clear-cut? Is it clear-cut distinction. But I think
Yeah, well, what was the rationality?
So what are we thinking here? We're thinking that even the most, some of the more stable things here have social aspects to it, right? And so the compliance to norms for, can you put diagrams into your research paper? That can, I guess, eventually be socially negotiated. So things will, in order to understand the values, I guess what the model says is that in order to understand values, it can be both a matter of relatively stable things that can be listed and a process of renegotiating these things. That's what the line.
Yeah. So we want at least, there might also be values here that are more stable and some that are less. So we wouldn't make a clear distinction between that. But we would need more data kind of to give you the. But our hypothesis is that we would need kind of a continuum to get the full spectrum of values.
Okay, I'm going to hurry you along because one more talk. And then,
I just wanted to say that I thought that Alan's suggestion was interesting for further research. The problem is, I think, psychological, because then you would be asking people about their failures rather than their successes. So you have to think very carefully how you approach that.
That's life.
Yeah, but it would be an interesting moment to be there when they. I agree with that. I would like to be there.
Well, in our field, there's a lot of interest in, has been for years, in children's errors, studying how they go wrong. You know.
Well, one answer to this question is where people are providing a record of what they're doing by writing down, showing all their working in these polymath projects. So there, of course, they do capture online the dead end, maybe in a slightly artificial and rhetorical fashion, but you know they are capturing all the dead ends and false starts and red herrings of the argument.
It could be a good reality TV show.
Yeah.
I can't resist the thought, of course, you say things over here, things that would be stable that could be listed. I can't help thinking that the most stable things probably don't have names. But in spite of that, let's